Well, welcome into another exciting episode of The Scene. I'm your host, Bubba Starts, and today I'm joined by Phil Tittle. He's a singer-songwriter and a Midwest Country Music Organization member. Hey, Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Well, thanks for being on the show today. We just talked for a few minutes before we went live here, but why don't you tell our listeners and myself a little bit of who is Phil Tittle?
I am a singer-songwriter, as you said. I'm living out in Wisconsin right now, just outside of Milwaukee. I settled in the Midwest a couple of years ago, so I'm not from this area. I originally grew up in the South, grew up down in Georgia. Joined the military. I was in the Air Force for about 23 years. Settled down on the Florida Panhandle for 15 years, and then I moved up here a couple of years ago where my mom was living, and I liked it and called it home.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
23 years, yeah. So you're retired?
Retired from the military, and I used my, oddly enough, I used my GI Bill to start pursuing music. I don't know that I think I probably spend too much time and money on it to call it a hobby. But I do have a quote unquote real job as a career coach for an accounting firm out in California to support my music making habit. I just recently, as we were talking beforehand, I started kind of really diving in and trying to make some good quality music, writing good quality music, and using some musicians down in Nashville, and that's kind of my current focus is getting an album put out by next year.
That's awesome. So where did music start for you then?
Always had a love of music, and I think my mom probably more than anybody, kind of her influence, but started playing guitar while I was in the military, picked it up, and had friends who also played. I wouldn't say I took it super serious, but I mean, I was pretty consistent with it, took lessons, and it wasn't until really after I retired from the military that I really started. I actually used my GI Bill for the Berklee School of Music. I did a couple of their online programs and really enjoyed the songwriting aspect of it. So just really honed in on that. And, all I really wanted to do was just kind of write songs. But then I started learning that really the only way you're going to get anybody to hear them is if you get out there and start playing them. So, started taking some vocal lessons, getting a little bit more deliberate with, and disciplined with my instruments and stuff like that. So yeah, it just kind of, it just like everybody, it just kind of snowballs and evolves, and you find your way with it.
That's fun. So you say it started with mom. Did she play music or was musical in any way?
She did. I don't remember ever growing up, like, other than just really liking music and kind of always having the radio on as opposed to the TV and things like that. But later after the kids kind of got grown and started going their own way, and she had a little more time, she did start doing some cover bands and stuff with her then husband. And I think mostly country music, did some songwriting. She passed away last year, and I was kind of digging through some of her old stuff and found lyrics to songs that she had been putting together. So I knew it was very important to her.
Really? Do you think that that's had some inspiration for you to really chase this for the next year?
I don't know that specifically. I think it's kind of wired into my DNA, and I credit my mom for that. But no, I think honestly it was just getting to a point in my life where I had a little bit more time, and I was being a little bit more deliberate. I'm not getting younger by any stretch, and I had the means and the resources, and however it happened, I came across a producer who works out of Nashville. I think he lives in Arizona, kind of splits his time. Incredibly talented in his own right. I think he's got a Grammy and a Dove nomination to his name. But he approached me, wanted to do some co-writing, and I just thought, man, I can't turn this down. I mean, he's got so much talent, and to be honest with you, I mean, once we get in the studio together, he just really brings my songs to life, and I've been very, very happy with not just what's coming out of it, but also just the amount I've learned in the short time I've been working with him.
That's great. In my music career, I've never had the opportunity to work with people like that, and not that I'm opposed to it at all. I get to work with a lot of friends and people that are close to me that we do great work together, but I've never worked with someone with a resume and a proven track record.
Yeah, it's the same. And I mean, I actually I credit one of my mentors. He guy like me. I mean, I consider him way better than me, but I've always he was just another guy that I could kind of sit and learn from. He didn't really have the resume to back it up, but I think like most people, and maybe a lot of your listeners, there's people out there just uber talented, and they just haven't had the right breaks or they haven't had the right opportunities yet. And this one just happened. The guy that I met just happened to have had that. And yeah, I mean, it's, when you do it for a profession, I think there's a lot that comes with that, and to include exposure to people who are just supremely talented. So I've really looked at it as a blessing and an opportunity to step in the studio with these guys and just kind of shut my mouth and start learning. And I think it's paying off in what you hear in the music.
That's great. That's great. I love the different avenues to get where we're all trying to go, right? Which is to record and release original music. I'm very fortunate to have some really talented friends in the South Dakota area, mostly in the Black Hills for my recording. But yeah, I can pretty much hand my idea to one guy, Tom Freer, is a good friend of mine, and he takes it and brings it to life, and it keeps the price point low because you're not, relying on somebody with a big name, right? And I'm not having to travel back and forth, and but our quality is something that's a little more raw than what you're going to get out of a Nashville producer. Just the way that he's going to approach the song, I think, is going to be completely different from how we would approach it, to where I like the raw sound, right? The single we're working on now is only our third release ever, really.
Oh,
So it should sound raw. It should sound like we're building
yeah,
something. And
I totally agree with you. I think down the road, there's a point where I'm going to want to, bring a band into a studio and kind of approach it from that perspective. Because I think you get something from that, rather than kind of tracking it over and over, multiple layers, and all that stuff is awesome and it sounds great, and we're kind of our ear is sort of attuned to it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I love that raw, just kind of in your face. It's almost like you're there on watching them on stage, and I love that.
right, right. And I would love to see more rooms get to that. I think that's why you had such great records back in the day, is because they had really great live rooms. And I think that music and the recording aspect of it, especially, has become so sterile, right? It's all
Yeah.
about zero cancellation. You know what I mean? Zero ambient noise. And that's what everybody's going for. And it's like, man, but the sound was in the walls, the
Right.
vibrations were in those buildings. And, I hope that comes back, and especially as you have more and more of the home studio is becoming more of that people are building those spaces around, and it's a really good sounding room, not a really dead sounding room.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you think about things like, Red-Headed Stranger. I think Willie Nelson recorded most of that like at his kitchen table or something, and and it's just because it's just real and it's authentic and it comes through.
I'm making records surrounded by my Christmas decorations in my garage, man. But we're having a good time, and it's really given me the opportunity to start to explore my songs a little bit more. I love the recording process. Has been a lot of fun for me. I'm considering now, because the room and the studio at home is set up a little bit better than it was a year ago. I had some goals to release an album myself last year, and it just never really materialized because I was trying to do it all with the band. And it's like, well, some of these songs don't even need that. What can you do with just a guitar and your voice from home and just work with that to begin with? So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. As exciting as it is, it still won't be without its challenges, because I've never recorded at home myself before.
Well, I think you really capture the essence of really. I mean, it's when you kind of view it through that lens of this is a journey. I mean, it really is, and if you kind of approach it without having a predetermined idea of what success should look like, instead just sort of let the journey and the process kind of dictate that. I think you enjoy it a lot more, and I think it really shows in the music. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, and I certainly found that to be true for me.
Yeah. So the stuff that you're working on, I know you've talked about wanting to bring a band into the studio. Are they fully producing the songs, or is it full band production as far as what you're releasing now? It's just not
Yeah,
guys that you're working with?
yeah, no, it's well, it's not like my band. It's not like I go on with a
Right.
bunch of guys. These
Right.
are
But the
session.
production is a full band. They're bringing in
Yeah,
guys into the studio and creating it.
correct. Yep, yep. It's well, I don't want to give the idea that I've been like doing this down there in Nashville is the norm. It's not. It's very much new for process for me. But yeah, they bring in session musicians. They sit there and they look at the chart. We talk it over. I kind of show or think of what I'm kind of thinking or what I'm hearing, and they knock it out of the park in 2 takes, and it's better than you ever imagined. And it's like, well, that's I guess that's what you do for a living.
Yeah.
It's
Right. Yeah.
it,
Well, and you realize that there's actually guys. So I recorded one of my singles. The drum tracks came from a guy out in the UK. I used the website called Air Gigs. I sent him the things. He recorded on his computer, sent me the digital files back. I sent them to a producer in Nashville that I was working with. He had a session musician come in, play the bass over top of it. I sent that to my friend out in Rapid City, Tom, who I mentioned before, and he did the guitar tracks over it and then sent it back to Nashville and mixed it all, right? So this thing, this record really traveled around the world and all over the United States to get there. So yeah, the possibilities spurned on by the advent of the internet and just how easy it is to transfer these files and everything now, and the technology makes it so easy to do everything. I mean, even just the technology in a simple recording interface that I have, a Zoom P4 that I can plug my phone into and have a conversation with my new friend
yep.
Phil. Like it's a pretty cool time period that we live in. If this stuff was all around in the 60s and 70s, how much different is the world then,
Oh,
right? With the artists that we had coming out. And I think now that I think there's a lot more songwriters out there than there ever has been, right? There's a lot of stories being told, and it's so important that all these stories get out there. And I think it's really cool to be in this moment where maybe you don't have the big songs and stars, but you have more and you have more specific stories, right? But people aren't painting in broad strokes anymore. We can get very specific about sharing those experiences. And because there's 8 billion people on the planet, somebody else has had that experience, right? And that's what we're gravitating to. And that's what we're writing songs for, right? I mean, that's why the Beatles were so popular, right? You're
right.
writing love songs when 80% of the planet are 20 somethings, right? Or
Right.
teenagers, or like there was a reason that those things in the early 60s, post World War II, because you were speaking to a very, a population, right? Where there was an old guard and a new guard, right? And those ripe situations. I don't think we're that far off from that now. I think the ages are just different. And you got a lot of these kids coming up that are writing some really poignant music, and a lot of the female songwriters are starting to tell their stories, and that's what I'm really excited about, because the platform is finally open, right? We kind of finally have. I know it's not on the scale that we want to yet, but there really is equality in music. I think the women in country music especially are the top of the songwriting, where they might not be selling all the records. I think a gal like Lainey Wilson, obviously, I'm a big fan of. Alexandra Kay is an independent artist making a lot of noise right now. and just so many others. Miranda Lambert had a really big comeback in the last few years, and really leaning into being a songwriter again and not worrying about being a pop star and being what Nashville told you to
Right.
be or any of that, but really digging into the songs again. And I think that's kind of we're having a revival, man. That late 60s, that hippie culture, and look at where the world's at. It ain't much different than it was back
Yep.
then. And the energy is ripe, I think, for a revival. And I think we're in it.
Yeah.
And when we look back on these times, a decade from now, and be like, man, that was a really special time. That was a really crazy time in human history, and look at the music and the stuff that came out of it.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's so accessible. And I mean, that can be, I'm sure some people feel like that might be at their detriment, because you can get lost in the crowd, but you can also too, you're not at the mercy of somebody else telling you can't share your music.
You can find your people in the crowd, though, and that's what you couldn't do before, right? Not everyone was given a voice and the ability to record their music and to do all of those things, right? Like, I don't care that I don't have a record deal. I have the ability to show everyone in the world my stuff.
Right.
That everyone I talk to or have connection to, I can tell about my podcast, my band, my music, my everything, right? And literally every single person on the planet pretty much has that capability now as well. And that's why you're having the rapid expansion of the collective consciousness, right? And all of these things. There's a reason these things are happening. There's an acceleration to it all happening right below our feet and all around us. So it's pretty exciting to have a podcast right now where all I'm doing is talking to independent songwriters.
Right. Yeah, which is cool. I mean, getting to share the same passion with somebody else who has the same passion as you. It's I envy you.
Well, Phil, I'm living the dream, man, and there's no reason that you can't do it. I'll send you a link for this little Zoom, and I'm sure you know plenty of people that you could talk to. It's just having conversations, but it's putting these things out there, and as we release them, right now, I don't think many people are listening. A few, friends and family of yours and mine are probably tuning in, but I consider it kind of like on the record. Eventually, people are going to find this thing, right? And I think they're going to mean something then as well as they do now. So it's a really fun thing. And I appreciate you not only being on the show, but your contribution to, just the world in general by sharing your music. So the last single was called Better Man. Can you tell me something about it?
Man, yeah. I'm sorry, did you say so?
Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, the first one I released back, I guess, in the spring was called I Wish I Knew. And that one had kind of this sort of, if I'm being honest, it sounds like kind of a Tom Petty vibe, that sort of classic rock, late 70s, early 80s. And this one, really, I kind of took a departure on it. It's a lot more of that singer-songwriter vibe. Definitely, I mean, it got an acoustic bed on it, but electric guitars, mid-tempo. Brought in a gal to do some backing vocals, which I think just really make it sort of take off and soar. And she also too had quite a resume behind her, and you can hear it in the song when she comes in on those backing vocals. But the song is just, I think as I've reached this age, I kind of feel like I'm entering that sort of Bob Seger era where I'm just writing about midlife, and it's kind of about that. It's sort of about recognizing maybe you've been climbing the wrong ladders and climbing the wrong mountains, and it's time to make a change. And that's what the song really is about, is doing that, and hopefully improving who you are and what you contribute to the world around you by doing that.
That's amazing. And then you bring up, Bob Seger, and I really see, I'm so young. I just turned 38 today. So I didn't see Bob Seger's career, right? Like, he's already, pretty much retired by the time I actually saw his last tour. My wife took me when we were still dating to see him in Rapid City, South Dakota on his farewell tour. And it's still at 72. I think he was then still putting on an incredible show. But I mean, he really did revive his career, and where him and a guy like Tom Petty as well stayed relevant because they kept writing about their current experiences. They weren't trying to grab back at something that they wrote and be the person they were at 22 or, Bob Seger. I mean, heck, he was releasing songs in the 60s. Right.
Yeah.
So to fast forward and having more hits in the 80s in music, I mean, that just doesn't happen in this day and age. If you could have a hit, 2 or 3 years, I think you're pretty happy because it is moving so fast, because there is so much music coming out and so many things coming out. What is a hit anymore, right? One thing that I've said to a lot of people on the show, and that's become a thing now, is that we don't do music for a living. We are living musicians.
Good way to put it.
Right. Well, because it just bleeds in all of us. That's been something that's evolved from listening to the show, is that, like, man, I've never had any choice whether to do music or not to do music. And even for you, you had a career in the military, but music was always inside of you and always there and was waiting for the right time. And now look at the things that are happening, for you and the things that you're making happen and using, I love that you're using your GI Bill to further your music career. I think that's great. A great use of that. Right. And because it feels, a lot of times like, the government and the military and music and artists are always kind of, diametrically opposed to one another.
Yeah, I hate that that's sometimes the perception. I agree with you. But when you think, I mean, there's organizations out there who are specifically taking folks like myself, veterans, whether they retired or just had a 4-year stint, but they're taking them because they have a story to tell. They've been places in the world and they've seen things, fortunately or unfortunately, in some cases that other people haven't, and they help them put it in a story, and they find that music is therapeutic. I mean, the guy just down the road here in Milwaukee, where I live, started that Guitars for Vets. He's a Vietnam vet, and he used it, and now, I would say thousands of veterans are benefiting through music to combat PTSD and stuff. And it's
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah. And actually that's something that has been on my heart, is finding some more charitable things so we can use this voice that we have. Like I said, just because nobody's really listening now, I know people are going to listen. And I know already locally in my little sphere of influence here that people are paying attention. I'm on the news pretty regularly on our TV news stations and doing these things. And while I don't see returns from that daily, it's definitely starting to take a toll on, people showing up at shows and being around, right? There's name recognition there now. So, how to use that for good, because I see guys like Jelly Roll. See, that's more my story. I've been to prison and I always haven't been on the right side of society. So to see a man like that who turned his life around and now is able to do good because of his music, he's touching people's lives and then turning that, positive energy and then amplifying it by doing all the charitable stuff that you can do then, right? Is just awesome. So on some small scale, I'm not saying that I want to be as big as that. It's never really been my intention. But to be that to my community, because I'm not leaving where I'm at, right? Like, I love the little town of 1,000 people, and this is where my wife's from. Like, we're not leaving our situation. I would love to go out and travel, and I don't mind going anywhere, but this is where my home is. And I think we're staunchly Midwestern in that fashion, that I'm not chasing a dream down in Nashville. I'll go down to Nashville to work. That doesn't bother me one bit, but I'm coming back to the Midwest because y'all be crazy.
I'm right there with you, man. I'll go to Nashville all day long and record and, and work, but I have no desire to be down in the middle of all that.
And to do the grind and all the songwriting, like, that's awesome. That's great. But honestly, I make better money playing out here than y'all do down there. I don't get the opportunities, but I'm not really looking for the opportunities. Who's going to hire? I'm 38. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they're not looking for the next pop star, and that's not me anyway. I appreciate guys like you that get down there to work. We've had a couple conversations with guys that do work down there. Friend of the show, Brad Morgan, who's a fellow MCMO member and a big reason why I joined the org. He, he works in Nashville half the year and writing and recording down there and being part of the writers' rooms and doing all that. And there's value to that, right? There's value to all of those things, but he comes home every summer to play all those good gigs in Iowa and Minnesota and hopefully South Dakota now, as we start to link and get some people out here. And Yeah, Phil, I really appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to plug on the show before I let you go?
Like anybody, I would love for people to check my music out, and if they like it, that's all the much better. But I think the easiest way is just to find me at my website, philtittlemusic.com, and I have links to wherever you go listen to music at. And yeah, I mean, and I would say hang on, because I got some really good stuff coming out over the course of this year. So
Well,
I'm
yeah,
excited.
we can't wait to hear it. I know you submitted a song for our other show, Love Noise, here, so we're really looking forward to sharing them with everybody and keeping up with your career from here. And thank you so much again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate it. This is awesome.
Great. Well, thank you. And for everybody else, thanks for making yourself part of The Scene. Thank you for listening. Remember to go to patreon.com/thescenesd. Follow us on all your social media channels and make yourself part of The Scene.